The champagne was still flowing when the accusation came. 200 guests packed the Ademi ballroom, gold chandeliers, 3 generations of empire on the walls. The 40th anniversary of Ademi Holdings, senators mingling with oil executives, old money touching new money. At the center, Chief Emmanuel Ademi, silver-haired, immaculate, a man who believed reputation was the only currency that never lost value. At the entrance, his only daughter, Zara Ademi, a 6-month-old boy wrapped in her arms. She wasn't there to explain herself, she was there to be seen and dismissed. This proves you've shamed this family in front of everyone who matters. His voice cut through the string quartet, it stopped. Zara held her son tighter. Her voice didn't shake, she'd never lied to him. She wasn't starting now just to make his image more comfortable. Beside the chief stood his niece, Chiamaka, dressed in white, eyes glistening with something that could pass for sympathy if you didn't know her. Zara knew her. She saw the smile Chiamaka hid behind her champagne glass. The chief turned to the room. A family name was the only inheritance that mattered, he said. A child born of shame couldn't carry it, not until his daughter named the father publicly in front of everyone. Zara looked at the man who taught her to read balance sheets before novels, who once told her love was a luxury and duty was a debt. The father is a good man, she said, better than anyone here understands, and one day the truth comes whether you want it or not. He didn't wait for that day. Security, escort her out, tell the photographers to shoot nothing. If betrayal, hidden bloodlines, and truths that won't stay buried keep you watching, hit subscribe. What happens to Zara and her son next will change everything you think you know about where he really came from. Welcome, besties, let's get into it. The doors closed behind her. Manhattan in October doesn't forgive anyone, least of all a woman in silk, with a baby and nowhere to go. She stood under the awning of the house she grew up in, watched her breath cloud, cried for the first time that night. Kingsley didn't know he'd just emptied a ballroom, didn't know his grandfather had just called him a shame. Zara pressed her lips to his head, made a promise she didn't know how she'd keep. Whatever happened, she knew exactly who his father was. One day the world would too. 14 months earlier, a rooftop bar, Zara sent by her father to charm investors, hatting every second of it. She slipped away to the edge of the roof, found a stranger already there. Sung-ho, International Shipping Logistics, he said. True, the way an iceberg is 10% visible. He didn't mention the rest. Not that night, not for months. The company on his card was a legitimate front for something older, more dangerous, the Biko line, not a business, an empire, and Sung-ho didn't work for it. He ran it. That night he was just a man who made her laugh, who asked about her work, not her father's company, who listened. 8 months followed, built in shadows. He vanished for days, came back with apologies that were almost believable. She told herself, international business. She didn't know each disappearance meant a war. Beek, a rival out of LA, closing in. He loved her the way men love when the love is dangerous and they choose it anyway. Told her once, with her, for the first time since his father died, he didn't feel like a weapon. He felt like a man. She got pregnant, she wasn't afraid. She was certain, the foolish, ordinary certainty of new love, that whatever came, they'd face it together. 3 weeks before she planned to tell him, he vanished completely. An ambush outside Newark, 3 of his men dead, Sung-ho critically wounded, smuggled to Seoul under a false name. His phone destroyed. His organization silent, even from his own mother, for a week on whether he'd survive. Zara didn't know any of it, she knew silence, and a body changing with no father to tell. She gave birth to Kingsley alone. Private hospital, her family's money, her father never once visited. She called the only number she had, 3 times, straight to a dead voicemail. If you've ever loved someone who vanished with no explanation, you know this exact kind of pain. Stay with us. What her family did next made it worse before it got better. Chiamaka always wanted what Zara had, never let anyone see it. Her father died with less money than his brother, the chief. She grew up with expensive taste and no fortune, what she wanted, to be named successor, over Zara. A pregnant, unmarried heiress with no husband was the best opportunity of her life. She learned about the pregnancy before the chief did, paid a housekeeper for it, and she made sure the mystery stayed a mystery. When an investigator got close to a Korean businessman named Sung-ho, she redirected him toward a driver. One dinner, No connection. A lie, simple and shameful, delivered straight to the chief's desk before anyone could correct it. By the time Zara understood what was being said about her, it had already hardened into fact. She tried to explain a man she loved, lost, not understood. The chief didn't want complexity. He wanted a villain simple enough to justify his anger. His niece gave him one. The people closest to us aren't always protecting us. Sometimes they're making sure we fall. If someone's ever smiled in your face while working against you, you know exactly how Zara felt. Subscribe now. The moment that exposes everything Chayamaka did is coming, and you don't want to miss it. 6 months, a small apartment, Upper West Side, her mother's help hidden from the chief. Kingsley grew the way Barbies do, all at once. Zara built a life in miniature. Junior role at a firm with no ties to her father. Proof to herself, if no one else, that she could stand alone. She kept every voicemail Sung-ho ever left her. Told herself it wasn't hope, it was proof on the loneliest nights that he'd been real. 6,000 miles away, he opened his eyes. 14 weeks after the ambush, 3 surgeries, a mother who'd already started grieving him. First word out of his mouth, her name. His second-in-command, Min-yi, explained the silence necessary to keep Beek's people from tracing anyone connected to him. Sung-ho understood the logic, hated it anyway. Find her, he said, whatever the risk now. What Min-yi found instead, an empty apartment, and buried in public records a son, born 7 months after Sung-ho disappeared. Sung-ho didn't sleep that night. One instruction to Min-yi: find my son, whatever it costs. 4 nights after the gala, Adiz, Zara's mother, came alone, a knitted blanket, a request Zara almost refused. I came for my grandson, Adiz said, not to defend my husband. He's defended himself enough. Zara let her in. Adiz lifted the sleeping baby, the blanket slipped. And there it was against his tiny wrist, a ring. Not a daimie, Adiz knew every piece of gold that had ever passed through her husband's house. This wasn't one of them, old, heavy, a tiger's head circling a crescent moon. Korean, the kind of crest families once used to mark alliances too dangerous to put in writing. Whose was it? Adiz asked. Zara told her, a gift from Kingsley's father the week before he vanished. Keep it close to the child, he'd said. It'll mean something someday. Adiz went still. What was his name? Sung-ho. The color left her face. Decades earlier, before the American Empire, before Zara was born, Adiz's own father did business with a Korean shipping family. A family whose alliance once saved an early Adami venture from collapse. The patriarch wore this exact ring. Told her, through a translator, it belonged to his family for 4 generations. Would belong to 4 more. Adiz looked down at her sleeping grandson, at the ring on his wrist. This ring proves everything you've denied. Adiz didn't confront her husband that night. She made calls instead, an old friend in Lagos, careful questions about a family named Choi. What she learned confirmed it. The Choi family hadn't stayed a shipping company. It had become something else, a name spoken with equal parts respect and fear. Currently run by a young man who'd survived an assassination attempt and vanished from public view. Adiz understood. Kingsley's father hadn't chosen to disappear, he'd been fighting to survive. She brought it to her husband carefully. He didn't want to hear it. He buried the doubt beneath duty, the same move that got them here in the first place. Across the city, Chayamaka felt the ground shift. An employee overheard enough. She understood what real proof of the father's identity would cost her, everything she'd spent years building. The ring needed to disappear, or at least get discredited fast. She found a jeweler, paid him for a lie, the ring a cheap replica, no history, no value, mass-produced, nothing. She didn't know the same jeweler had already been visited, weeks earlier, by a quiet, serious man asking about a ring with a tiger and a crescent moon. Min-yi, the jeweler, had promised to call if anyone ever asked. Chayamaka walked in asking for exactly that lie. He made the call that same afternoon. Every move Chayamaka makes to cover the truth is the thing that exposes her. Comment below if you think she deserves to get caught in her own trap. Min-yi reached the shop within the hour. What he learned confirmed it. Someone inside the family was working to bury the truth, which meant someone had a reason to. He reported it to Sung-ho. A woman close to the family, trying to discredit a ring that meant nothing to a stranger and everything to an insider. One instruction: get me to New York this week quietly. Zara had no idea any of it was happening. She was still doing the exhausting, ordinary work of raising a baby alone. Then Adiz came back, this time with answers, not questions: the Choi family's history, the ring's authenticity, the danger Sung-ho had likely survived, her growing certainty that Chiamaka had done far more than gossip. Zara sat with it the way you sit with news too big for one sitting. Part of her wanted rage at Chiamaka, at her father, at a year she couldn't get back. A bigger part felt relief. She hadn't been abandoned, she'd been protected. Was he alive, she asked her mother. Adiz took her hand. Yes, and it's time to undo what this family did to you, publicly, soon. A call to the chief's office, an unfamiliar number, a man representing the Choi shipping interests, a matter of family obligation decades old. 2 days later he walked in. Not the elderly patriarch Emmanuel half expected. A young man, moving with the stiffness of someone still healing. Composure that made the chief understand, without a word, exactly whose presence he was in. Sung-ho didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He laid it out, who he was, the family history, the ambush, the destroyed phone, the silence that was protection, not abandonment, a son he'd learned about weeks ago. A flight he took against doctor's orders to make sure that son never grew up believing his father chose to vanish. Then he placed a folder on the desk. The jeweler's account, Chiamaka's payment, and something worse, a transfer from her personal account to the same investigator who'd delivered the false report. Dated 1 week before it reached the chief's desk. Emmanuel read every page in silence. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to defend himself. It was to ask how deep the deception went and who else was in on it. 3 days later, a family dinner framed as smoothing things over. Only Adiz and Zara knew the real reason. Chiamaka arrived on time, dressed perfectly. No idea the ground had already moved under her. Zara walked in with Kingsley. Beside her, for the first time in almost a year, Sung-ho. The room went silent again, different silence this time. Chiamaka's eyes moved, Sung-ho, Zara, the chief's face. Something shifted in her posture. The first flicker of understanding. Emmanuel stood, explained the ring. The Choi family's history, the debt he'd forgotten, Sung-ho's survival and the real reason for his silence. Then the folder, the false report, the payment, the jeweler. Chiamaka tried to argue, the transfer proved nothing, could have been anything. Adiz answered her. 1 week before the false report, not a coincidence, and you were unusually present every time this family's anger toward Zara needed feeding. The chief didn't raise his voice either, but something in it had hardened. You used my trust to turn me against my own daughter and grandson. There's no place for you here anymore. Chiamaka left without a word. The fury on her face said this wasn't over. It would take months for the rest of what she'd done, financial mismanagement, buried deep in a subsidiary, to fully surface. That night was only the beginning. Emmanuel turned to his daughter, really looked at her like a daughter, not a liability. I let fear of embarrassment outweigh my responsibility to listen, he said. No amount of family history undoes the months I believed the worst of you. I'm sorry, it's not enough, I know. Zara didn't forgive him fully, not that night, but she let him hold his grandson for the first time. Watched his hands that had signed 1,000 contracts, tremble around a child he'd once called a shame. Kingsley grabbed his tie. Something in the old man's face finally broke. Sung-ho stood beside her through all of it, still healing, still carrying the fear of a life he'd almost never gotten to have. Outside, on the same terrace where she'd once frozen alone, he told her everything. The regret, the silence he couldn't have prevented, and the not knowing that nearly destroyed him anyway. He didn't expect forgiveness just because the truth surfaced. He intended to earn it, one ordinary day at a time. The ring proved who his father was, Zara told him. It doesn't prove what kind of father he'll be. That takes time. I'm willing to give you the chance. No fairy tale. Sung-ho split his time between Seoul and New York, necessary, exhausting, frustrating. Enemies from the old rivalry still needed managing. Zara learned slowly that the distance was protection, not absence. He learned to change diapers badly, made every appointment he could. Missed a first tooth and apologized so much Zara had to tell him to stop. Emmanuel rebuilt what he broke, restored Zara's full standing publicly at real cost to himself, and never once asked for thanks. Adiz grew closer to her daughter than she'd been in years. On Kingsley's first birthday, same ballroom that once called him a shame, Sung-ho gave Zara a small box. Not a ring for her hand. A photo of his father wearing the crest that started all of this. A letter explaining its full history for Kingsley when he was old enough to understand what it meant to belong to two families an ocean apart, tied by a debt no one had forgotten. Zara watched her son sleep on his father's shoulder in the room that once cast them both out. She didn't know exactly what came next. She knew she wasn't facing it alone anymore. Sometimes the people meant to protect us fail first. Choose fear over truth, cause a wound that never fully heals. But when someone finally faces what they did, tells the truth, changes without expecting a reward, healing becomes possible. Tell us in the comments which moment hit hardest, the ring, the reunion, Chiamaka's exposure. Does Emmanuel deserve forgiveness or was it too deep? Subscribe now. Our next story hits even harder. Like it, turn on notifications, share it with someone who believes the truth always finds its way home. We'll see you in the next one, besties.